the membranes of these cells are very selective of what they let through and what they trap.
Okay.
Okay?
Those are those big enough to let like protein, the channels?
There's no proteins that come from the soil. The plant has to like manufacture them from amino acids that it makes from its sugar.
Yeah.
Plant gets very little from the outside. It gets nitrogen from the soil. It gets like, you know, small, like magnesium and some other like small minerals that it needs in really small amounts. It gets some salts from the soil, but mostly water.
Ms. Chamness?
Yeah.
You said that proteins like don't eat some, or plants that have a lot of protein because like the nitrogen comes from. So then why do animals have a lot of protein?
Yeah, that's a really good question. We obviously have a way of concentrating it. I know your herbivores, like your cows and stuff, and they have all those different stomachs. They have very specialized ways to like digest the cellulose and obviously somehow concentrate the proteins, because then they need all the protein they need all the amino acids at least to build the muscle.
Okay.
So I'm kind of skirting it because I've really been, that connection is not there for me either. I've been trying to actually figure that out. So, because you have plants and everything has to come from the plants, yet herbivores do have a way of ending up with a lot more protein. Yeah. So now some plants have a lot of protein, and plants that do have a lot of protein are because they have a symbiotic relationship with bacteria that actually make the nitrogen into a usable form, and those live on their roots, and that's things like soybeans, and that's why they're so full of protein. Okay, long distance transport, xylem and phloem. And we said way back when we were doing like leaf structure and photosynthesis, easy way to remember which one's which? Phloem food, xylem water, right? And X and W are like the end of the alphabet, but phloem food is easy. So we can start with that. So we're going to start with the xylem. And again, the xylem, if you have a woody plant, it's the wood part. There's only one active ring of xylem in a tree. All the rest of what we look at as wood is dead xylem. Actually, it's all dead, but non-working xylem. Okay? So we're going to look at the structure of xylem. More for you to memorize. We know that the xylem is sclerenchyma. We're going to remember it because we know it's wood. We know wood is hard. We know sclere means hard. Okay? So it's going to be sclerenchyma cells. There's actually a disease in humans called scleroderma where your skin actually hardens. It causes death. And so that word sclere somehow means hardness. It's a Latin derivative. Okay. Xylem is made up of two kinds of cells, tracheids and vessel elements. Something else to memorize, but both tracheids and vessel elements are sclerenchyma. Okay, double cell walls. Do you want me to, for people, some people maybe not hear this really quickly. Just if I can remind you. Examples, remember parenchyma, just one cell wall, and you can actually see the stain. And then you look at the parenchyma, and you can see the cell wall has the same color stain, and you can just see it's like much thicker. Here again we have parenchyma and parenchyma, but then when we have sclerenchyma, it's got two cell walls. It's got the regular primary cell wall, and then it's got a super, super thick, and some have thicker cell walls than others. And remember, sclerenchyma not only makes up xylem, but it makes up like the shells of nuts. Anything in the plant that's hard is going to be made of sclerenchyma. And these are actual pictures of two different sclerenchyma cells, and you can see how thick compared to the parenchyma cells that are surrounding. So the xylem is sclerenchyma. Sorry, it sounds like I just made all this stuff up. Or somebody did. Somebody actually did. Made the names up. Okay. So I'm going to picture's worth 1,000 words. If you zoom in and look at the xylem, then this is what it looks like microscopically. And you can see this is like a cross section. So all the cells are tube shaped and they're hollow and they're dead. So it's basically just a big fat double cell wall that's hollow inside. But you can see that the vessel element cells are just bigger. Their lumen is much bigger. Here is a close-up picture of the vessel elements, just really zoomed in on them. You can see that they're really big, but look at the cell wall, still very thick. And then here's a cartoon picture, but I think in some ways, because it's cut, it's easier to see. Again, you can see the tracheids, and they're cut in half. They would be tube-shaped, but you can see how small their diameter is compared to the vessel elements. And then you do have a little parenchyma, which they've shown in purple, just kind of like in between the tracheids and the vessel elements. But all together, this is the xylem, okay? And this is what's transporting the water. It's also supporting the tree because it's the wood and it's super strong.
And that's why it needs a double cell wall, because it has to be like really.
Right, it's supporting all that weight, like tons sometimes of like really big trees. Okay, just another picture. I like this because what you can see, you see all the little perforations, the little holes in the sides of the cell wall, and also in between the cells, do you see the little perforations? So what happens is, and again, this is another picture just like what you already saw, but you can just see it a little bit better. You can see the tracheids and then the vessel elements. You don't want, why do you not want all of your xylem to be vessel elements? 2 reasons.
Less surface area.
Okay, yes, remember cohesion and adhesion, which is what makes the water move through the xylem. There's not as much surface area of a big fat cell to cling to. The more smaller around cells, the more surface area on the inside for the water to cling to. And second of all, cell wall is what's supporting it. So the smaller around cells are going to have a lot more cellulose and they're going to have a lot more support. So it's a mixture. I don't really know why you have to have vessel elements in there. There must be a reason. But one of the things that can happen, water moving from the xylem up to the leaves is kind of like suctioning, like sucking on a straw. I don't know, have you guys ever siphoned anything? Probably not. I mean, it used to be a big thing. That's how people used to steal gas before locking gas caps. I never did it. But basically, when you siphon something, you can like suck on it. You put a tube down in something that you want to siphon out, and you suck on it, and that provides pressure. And then you don't have to keep sucking on it. The pressure, it'll just keep moving. And so as it moves, if it gets an air bubble in there, though, what'll happen?
It'll stop.
It'll stop. So that is actually the reason for all these perforations. Because if you get air bubbles in the xylem, your xylem isn't like done for and no water can move up. The water, as it's moving up this way, can just move through the perforations to another set of xylem and just keep going. So the xylem is a whole compilation of those cells going like around the tree. So water can just move up and over and up and over. And so there's lots of pathways for the water to take. So you never have to worry about air bubbles like cutting off your supply of water to the tree. Okay? So that's the xylem. Okay? So it's water and minerals being transported from the roots to the leaves. This is just saying, I have a better picture. That second bullet was just saying, like, how does the water get in the first place? And we actually just covered this when we did symplastic and apoplastic movement. The water is moving through both by the apoplast and symplast, through the epidermis, okay, which is dermal tissue. Then it's got to move through this area of ground. Then it has to get through the endodermis, which this happens to be colored blue. It's not really blue. And then it gets into the stele, which is the vascular tissue. And then as the vascular tissue goes up into the stem from the roots, that's when it splits off into all the xylem. Okay? So hopefully that makes sense. Here's a real picture, which we looked at the first week that we did this, with, again, the dermal tissue, ground tissue. This is the stele. And then you have xylem and phloem. So, but that's the stele, but it doesn't look like that in the stem. If you remember, let's just go back. Okay, that's actually what happens to the vascular tissue in the stem. Do you remember? It starts out as the stele, and when it gets into the stem, do you remember this? Where's the xylem in this picture? Each one of these is a vascular bundle, but the vascular bundle is made up of xylem and phloem and Do you remember? I know I'm really like, because it's been now, what,